For American Pickers fans, Danielle Colby's silence over Frank Fritz is finally broken. Over the years, many have speculated about Frank's departure and Danielle's inner sentiments. She is now prepared to speak. Many were perplexed. Frank Fritz, what happened? Why did their bond deteriorate? Mike then started talking. His speech was quite clear, despite its modest volume. Nothing had ever been shared before, yet he brought up the blunders, the problems, and the suffering. After Danielle nodded, she joined in as well. Though gentle, her words were sincere. Their expressions of regret were more than words alone, but in a manner that demonstrated their sincerity. The truth had finally come out. It had nothing to do with assigning blame. Being honest and confronting one's past, no matter how painful, was central. This was more than just a story. It dealt with friendship, trust issues, and the difficulty of mending fences. Regarding the court appearance, that is our understanding. Mike Wolfe and Danielle Colby's unexpected court appearance was a stunning development, something the audience was unprepared for. Mike, Frank, and Danielle had been the favorites of American Pickers viewers for a long time. The three of them appeared to be inseparable, as they were constantly on TV together, laughing, going on adventures, and arguing. However, the connection was starting to weaken behind closed doors. There was no legal dispute between Mike and Danielle that necessitated their court appearance. Neither of them was involved in a legal dispute or charge. Rather, a far more weighty matter was at the center of the courtroom drama: Frank Fritz's guardianship and his care. After suffering a stroke in 2022, Frank's health quickly declined. His ability to take care of himself had diminished. Everyone who knew him, fans, friends, and family, was concerned about what was to come for him. In the courtroom, everyone was talking about Frank and who would be making decisions for him from here on out. There was a guardianship case involving Frank, and Mike and Danielle were named in it. They were now confronting the truth about what had happened to their beloved friend, Frank, and it was an emotional moment, not because of a lawsuit or a battle, but because of that. The atmosphere in the courtroom was heavy with guilt and melancholy. Mike and Danielle were visibly distressed, showing signs of regret about the outcome. They spoke softly and with grave looks on their faces. They reminisced about the rough years after Frank left American Pickers. They meant it when they apologized. Although it was difficult to listen to, Mike and Danielle appeared to be very reflective. The failure to contact Frank sooner was something Mike acknowledged in court. "I should have contacted him," he said. "I ought to have kept a closer eye on him. My personal affairs got in the way." In her expression of shame and guilt toward the judge, Danielle mirrored those feelings. She expressed her remorse for her inaction and acknowledged that she should have been more supportive of the two men. "It would have been my responsibility to do more to maintain unity within the team." Their words weighed heavily on you. They were inseparable from Frank because of the years they spent working together, and the friendship they shared with him was integral to their identities. However, the gap widened at some point throughout the journey. The sitting judge listened attentively, recognizing the delicate nature of the situation while simultaneously stressing the significance of prioritizing Frank's best interests going ahead. In the courtroom, there was a palpable feeling of loss and disappointment, as everyone realized that the proceedings had veered off course. Mike and Danielle were forthright in their admission that they had no ill will against Frank, and that the growing rift between them was partially due to their own problems. They admitted defeat rather than making excuses in their explanation. They were all too aware of the difficulties that had been endured behind the scenes, and the fact that things could have been managed more effectively. Remorse, devotion, and Danielle Colby's declaration. Similar to Mike, Danielle Colby spoke at length throughout the court hearings. Since she had been a part of American Pickers from the beginning, Danielle's devotion to Frank and Mike was evident. She was quite complimentary of both men and clearly attempted to mediate their differences behind the scenes. However, Not even she could deny that there hadn't been sufficient effort to maintain the connection. Danielle stated her sincere remorse for her delay in intervening to resolve the conflict. She admitted that the whole thing had been stressful for her. The show and their collaboration weren't the only things that mattered. Those pals who had once been more like relatives were the focus. Fans know Danielle isn't hesitant about sharing her feelings because they've seen her publicly discuss the aftermath. She went so far as to post an emotional video on social media. She blurted out, "I miss Frank in the old days." As she wiped away a tear, she continued, "It was more than a mere post." She expressed her profound impact on a raw level. As Danielle thought back on the years they had wasted and the things she wished she could do better, her voice betrayed her genuine sorrow. From what she said, it was obvious that Danielle cared deeply about Frank and wished desperately that things had turned out differently. She expressed her desire to be present for him at this moment, expressing her hope that it is not too late. In that instant, it was clear that Danielle's emotions were deeply connected to what had happened before, to her connection with Frank and Mike, and to the desire for their eventual healing as a unit. Mike Wolfe regrets his actions and takes stock. Mike Wolfe, who has a reputation for being aggressive, was unrelenting in his court statement. He relaxed his guard and talked honestly before the judge and the audience. "Frank was never my intention." Speaking with a quiver in his voice, Mike expressed his deepest regret at the turn events had taken. "My closest friends are the most valuable relationships in my life, but I let my fame to cloud my judgment. I was mistaken in thinking I had an infinite amount of time to rectify the situation." Mike accepted blame for the consequences. He came clean about how he had put his friendships with American pickers on the back burner due to the demands of his fame. "There was a lot on my plate. The show and everything else engrossed me. Not to mention that I should have contacted Frank sooner. Personally, I feel bad about it. That will be something I'll always be sorry for." His speech was profound, because these were the remarks of a person who has endured a difficult lesson. Mike meant more than merely to say sorry. It mirrored his past failures and the wisdom he had gained from them. Nothing, he realized, could ever trump the strength of a genuine friendship. Evidently, Mike had given considerable consideration to the events of the past and how he may have improved his friendship with Frank. "I ought to have contacted him earlier. Apologies," he admitted, his voice betraying his sincere regret. It wasn't merely a legal issue in the courtroom. It was about wanting to mend fences after realizing how hurtful things had been in the past. Although Mike's heartfelt comments could not change what had already happened, they did help put things right. The real story as it unfolds. The truth behind the events. The truth about what had transpired behind the scenes started to emerge when Mike and Danielle spoke in court. It wasn't as cut and clear as it appeared when Frank left American Pickers. The rift has its roots in misunderstandings, health problems, and individual hardships. Mike said that he and Frank's friendship had always been strong, but that things started to alter when they were older. Disagreements arose due to divergent ideas and individual issues. According to Mike, "Frank and I simply weren't communicating anymore." He didn't spill the beans, but it was obvious that Frank and he were both dealing with issues outside of work that were interfering with their capacity to collaborate. The stress of maintaining the show and meeting the regular responsibilities of the work eventually got to Mike. Things became much more difficult due to Frank's absence, particularly during his health struggles. From her own experience, Danielle spoke about her attempts to mediate and the times she felt helpless. She remarked that everyone was having a hard time in their own manner. However, our communication was lacking. I should have known better. Even Danielle couldn't escape the growing tension between Mike and Frank. The peacemaker was of the opinion that she was powerless to close the divide. According to her, she ought to have done more. It was tragic to hear, but it also served as a sobering reminder of how easily one's own problems, be they physical illness, mental anguish, or miscommunication can strain even the strongest friendships. The aftermath wasn't caused by a single event or person, but rather by a chain reaction of factors that became unmanageable. However, Mike and Danielle admitted guilt in front of the judge. It was never easy to face the truth, but what transpired between Frank, Danielle, and Mike was no easier. Their testimony in court provided additional context for a tale that many assumed they understood. Now that everything is on the table, there is an opportunity for reconciliation, insight, and perhaps the start of something fresh. Please like and share the video if this tale touched you or changed your perspective. Then hit that subscribe button to get all the latest news as it happens.